Step into the gilded chaos of Thelma Furness's life, a tale spun with threads of scandal and whispers of forbidden love. Born in the serene embrace of the Swiss Alps, Thelma's existence was a dazzling contradiction of innocence and intrigue. As a twin entwined in an almost ethereal bond, the fabulous Morgan sisters wove through the jazz-soaked nights of Manhattan, where the glitter of Broadway stars mingled with the shadows of bootleggers. Thelma's magnetic charm ensnared legends like Charlie Chaplin and the dashing Ali Khan, her affairs igniting gossip from Hollywood's Golden Hills to London's aristocratic salons. But it was her incendiary liaison with the Prince of Wales that truly set the stage ablaze, and her introducing him to Wallis Simpson that led to the abdication crisis that shook an empire. Thelma's ascent to nobility as Lady Furness added yet another layer of allure, positioning her at the heart of British high society. Her story is a symphony of clandestine rendezvous, shimmering ballrooms, and shattered hearts, where every glance held a promise and every whisper carried the weight of dynasties. Join us as we unravel a narrative of passion and betrayal, a testament to a woman who danced on the edge of legend, leaving a trail of seduction and scandal in her wake. This is the story of the scandalous life of Lady Thelma Furness. Born in 1904 in Switzerland, she emerged as one half of a twin constellation, born 1 minute before her twin Gloria to an American diplomat, Harry Hayes Morgan, and his indomitable wife, Laura. Mrs. Morgan, a blend of Irish-American fervor and Chilean passion, was the daughter of an American Civil War general. The Morgans already had a son, Harry, and a daughter, Consuelo, but the twins swiftly captivated Laura's all-consuming focus. Identical in appearance, the sisters were indistinguishable even to their parents, their lovers, and eventually their children. Only a small scar from roller skating set Thelma apart. Their bond was so profound, it bordered on the telepathic, and through every tempest, they stood united. Their father's diplomatic duties led them from the Swiss Alps to the canals of Holland and the sunlit streets of Barcelona. Their English, tinged with a French-Spanish lilt and a slight stammer, was as eclectic as their upbringing, which was haphazard and rootless, instilling in them a deep-seated insecurity. Their mother, a mercurial force, alternated between suffocating affection and volcanic rage. Laura's creed was that true friendship was an illusion, as people always sought something in return, and that success for women lay in manipulating men with their feminine wiles. As the First World War loomed, they fled Spain, and the twins were deposited in a boarding school. Misfits in this new world, they clung to each other amidst the cold and unwelcoming environment of England, loathing everything from the weather to the food and the people. A brief stint at another Swiss boarding school ended when their parents relocated to America. In a daring move, they falsified a telegram to join them. Thelma wrote the consul using her father's name and requested 2 more tickets, both for her and her sister. Her father took it in good stride, and with that, they were off to America. Their arrival in New York in 1916 caused a sensation. With their parents often absent, the twins attended the Convent of the Sacred Heart and were left there for long periods as their parents traveled around the world. The girls saw their mother only 4 times in 3 years. At 17, they took an unprecedented step, moving into a brownstone apartment in New York. Their youth and independence were rare. Their parents were in Brussels, and a vigilant landlady watched over them. They reveled in the vibrant Manhattan nightlife and quickly became celebrities in the gossip columns. In these nightclubs, Broadway stars waltzed with bootleggers, film stars, dukes, and convicts. The egalitarian spirit of these nights eased their entry into New York society, soon making them fixtures at nightclubs, debutante balls, and tea parties. They had been smoking since they were 13 and loved cocktails, which were the height of fashion, as it was a way to disguise the bad taste of some of the bootleg liquor. Smoking was a badge of modernity. Merely 2 decades before, girls could be arrested for smoking in public. It was also touted as a slenderizing aid. Both girls were deft needleworkers and crafted most of their own clothes. Together, they made a striking impact. The gossip columnist Charlie Knickerbocker became friends with the girls and helped turn them into socialites, dubbing them the marvelous Morgan sisters. They attracted a great deal of male attention, but Thelma claims in her biography they had a strong sense of propriety, which made affairs unthinkable. They craved romance, love, marriage, and children. Soon, Thelma met James Vale Converse Jr. at a dinner party, and they eloped to get married in Maryland. James came from a wealthy family, but had squandered much of his fortune in a failed oil venture. The couple moved to Florida. After a few months, she began to miss her sister Gloria terribly, and James proved to be an abusive alcoholic. It was only after a miscarriage caused by a fall that she resolved to leave him. While she lay seriously ill in the hospital, it was Gloria, not James, who remained steadfastly by her side. During her divorce proceedings, the girls relocated to California, and Thelma decided to pursue a career in acting. However, fame proved elusive. Despite a few minor roles, her acting career never soared, but her social life flourished. She went swimming at Pickfair, the glamorous home of Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks. There, she met Charlie Chaplin and had a fleeting affair. The newspapers even speculated on an impending marriage, but it was merely a casual liaison. To quell the gossip, she distanced herself from him, and within months, he remarried. Drawn to older men, she began an affair with the 50-year-old Richard Bennett. However, she soon decided that neither acting nor Bennett was her calling, and she departed for Europe to visit her parents and her sister Consuelo. In Europe, she reinvented herself once again. At a dinner in Paris, she met Marmaduke Furness, a lord and one of Britain's wealthiest men. He was considered one of the most brilliant businessmen in the city. Duke, as he was known to his friends, was 20 years older than Thelma. He had been married before, and gossip swirled around the mysterious death of his first wife. She had died aboard his yacht. Despite there being a doctor on board, she could not be saved, and though there was adequate refrigeration on board, she was hastily buried at sea. Lord Furness had 2 grown-up children, Avril and Christopher, known as Dick. The first evening they met, Duke took her dancing in the nightclubs, where they indulged in champagne and caviar. He sent her flowers the next morning, hoping they would stay fresh until they met again. He returned 2 weeks later and would visit her almost every other weekend. They frequented the racecourse by day and dined in the finest restaurants by night. Thelma recalls how they were always given the best tables, and Duke indulged her every whim. One night at the Embassy Club, he asked her when her divorce would be finalized. Thelma said her husband was still hoping for a reconciliation. Duke then arranged for private detectives to follow her husband, and within a month, he agreed to the divorce. Her mother, Laura, promptly held a press conference to announce her daughter's engagement. They got married in June 1926 at St. George's Registrar's Office. They had a small ceremony at one of Duke's houses on Arlington Street. In the first months of their marriage, Duke gave in to her every whim, and she thought him a perfect husband. In her memoir, she says she was never happier. In March 1929, she gave birth to a boy, William Anthony, named Tony. She was part of a generation of society women whose children were taken care of by nannies. Excessive preoccupation with children was thought to be a bourgeois instinct. Later, when she was blamed for her lack of motherliness with her child, she blamed English nannies whom she said simply wouldn't allow her in the nursery. Her niece, little Gloria Vanderbilt, corroborated her story. She said Tony's nurse was awful and hated it when Thelma came into the nursery. Little Gloria called the nanny an old witch. A few months postpartum, Duke's roving eye began to wander, and he took up an affair with Peggy Hopkins, a woman who had married and divorced 6 millionaires and was largely thought of as a gold digger. Thelma confessed in her biography that had he remained faithful, so would she. She felt abandoned and wounded. It was in the summer of 1929, shortly after discovering her husband's infidelity, that she re-encountered the Prince of Wales. She had first met the prince in 1926 at a party with her husband, Lord Furness. She spoke later of how handsome she thought he was and that his eyes captivated her. He welcomed her to England and asked her to dance a Viennese waltz. Upon seeing her again 3 years later, he immediately approached to congratulate her on the birth of her son, inquiring if she often visited London and extended an invitation for her to dine with him the following week. Yet the tale is shrouded in conflicting versions. The prince recalled meeting Lady Furness at a house party and later on the same train to London, inviting her to join him out of sheer boredom. Despite Thelma's claims of not seeing the prince for years after their initial encounter, they had reportedly attended several events together, even dancing on a few occasions. The speculation about Thelma's honesty stems from the timing concerning the birth of her son Tony. Establishing the precise date of her relationship with the prince was crucial, as Tony was born in 1929. According to Duke's stepdaughter, Lord Furness doubted Tony's paternity, cruelly referring to him as the bastard. While there is no conclusive evidence about Tony's father, his striking resemblance to his paternal grandfather suggests it was not the prince's child. Nonetheless, in her memoir, Thelma sought to legitimize her son and dispel any doubts. Ironically, by concealing meetings, she inadvertently drew attention to the timing, making it seem as though she had something to hide. During their dinner, they sat by the fire, sipping cocktails at York House. Thelma found the prince effortlessly conversational. She said that when they spoke, it felt as though they had always known each other. When he asked if he could call on her again soon, she agreed, and thus their affair commenced. He was the antithesis of Duke. She adored his gentleness and shyness. However, throughout their liaison, Edward's former mistress Frida Ward loomed in the background. Their conversations were limited to trivialities and mutual acquaintances. He never bared his soul to her. In public, Thelma maintained a facade of marital harmony with her husband. Privately, however, she devoted her time to Edward. Her sister Gloria provided invaluable support, relocating to London and renting a house to offer the couple a discreet meeting place. The prince invited Thelma to come with him on an African safari. In her memoirs, Thelma recounts their idyllic holiday. Mornings began with Edward waking her at dawn before he ventured into the bush, their tents pitched side by side. Evenings were spent together by the fire under the vast African sky. Their return journey was fraught with peril when Edward fell gravely ill, collapsing over the steering wheel. Thelma, paralyzed with fear, feared he might die. Miraculously, Edward managed to drive them to safety, arriving at their train with a fever of 105 degrees, later diagnosed with malaria. As their affair intensified, Thelma was viewed as a negative influence, that she was part of a fast-living set that clashed with the country's economic woes. Her American origins fueled further criticism. As Edward became more tardy and frequently seen out late, public opinion turned against him. The perception was that Thelma's influence was making him too democratic and common, introducing a touch of vulgarity to his household, evident when she brought cocktails to his home, which the butler refused to serve. The prince finally convinced him to mix the cocktails, but that he would put the ice in himself, as in the American style, to save the butler the indignity. The king's concern grew over the 38-year-old prince's bachelorhood, and various royal candidates, including a German princess suggested by Hitler, were proposed as potential brides, but none captured Edward's interest. He declared he had only ever wished to marry Frida, but the king viewed her as unacceptable. In 1931, the prince and Thelma's visit to a Catholic shrine sparked controversy given the Protestant identity of the British monarchy. The British public and press criticized the prince's actions, finding it inappropriate for the future head of the Church of England to engage in Catholic practices, even superficially. Thelma, baffled by the outrage, received supportive letters from Catholics, unaware of the full implications of such actions on the Protestant monarchy. It is unjust to paint her as a malign figure. The Duke and Duchess of York appreciated her, and the couples often socialized. Thelma was mesmerized by the prince and failed to discourage his more indulgent tendencies, leading to perceptions of him being more spoiled and petulant. Their quiet weekends away allowed Edward to escape his public life's artificiality. In the evenings, they found contentment in simple pleasures, stitching tapestries side by side. Thelma cherished these moments of tranquility. Whenever separated, they exchanged pink and green teddy bears, ensuring a part of each other remained close. Edward affectionately signed his letters with "Love from the Bear." Thelma is perhaps most remembered for introducing Wallis Simpson to the prince. At the time, Wallis was married to her second husband and was Thelma's friend. However, accounts of their introduction vary. Thelma claimed it was in late 1930 or early 1931 during cocktails brought by Consuelo. Edward recalled a different time during a hunting trip, while Wallis insisted it was winter 1931, without Consuelo's presence. Wallis was gradually integrated into the Morgan sisters' circle, borrowing their clothes for events. The Simpsons became regulars at Fort Belvedere. Initially, Edward was hesitant, disliking Ernest Simpson, but Thelma persuaded him, valuing Wallis as a dear friend. Wallis downplayed their intimacy in her autobiography, claiming they were not close and did not share confidences. Despite this, Thelma gifted Wallis 3 rings, ruby, diamond, and silver, for Christmas. They would read to each other at meetings, though Wallis complained about Thelma's reading style and voice in her letters home. Thelma, considering Wallis witty and charming, felt secure, never perceiving her as a threat. Yet Wallis's sharp wit and repartee captivated Edward. Thelma, blinded by friendship, missed the budding romance, and Wallis repeatedly assured her she had no romantic interest in Edward. In 1933, Thelma finally divorced Duke, who did not contest to avoid involving the royal family. The prospect of a twice-divorced woman marrying the heir to the throne seemed unlikely, and Thelma realized she could be no more than the prince's mistress. She confided in a friend that her life felt stagnant. Thelma was blossoming into a style icon. In January 1934, she graced an advertisement for Pond's cold cream. King George loathed women wearing makeup and detested any self-aggrandizement, and this was seen as another stain in Thelma's reputation. Early in 1934, Thelma decided to travel to America to see her sister Gloria. They exchanged heartfelt goodbyes and their cherished teddy bears. A few days before her departure, Thelma met with Wallis Simpson. Wallis assured her that the prince would be lonely without her, and Thelma requested that Wallis keep an eye on him to ensure he stayed out of mischief. Wallis agreed. Once she was gone, Wallis and Edward became fast friends. He attended her cocktail parties regularly, finding her an engaging conversationalist on topics ranging from politics to literature and the situation in Germany. Unlike Thelma, Wallis was well-versed in politics, and she often debated her ideas with the prince, who admired her spiritedness. "She was the most independent woman I had ever met," he wrote in his memoir. Soon, he was calling Wallis 2 or 3 times a day. She would mother him and boss him around, earning his respect. Gossip soon emerged, suggesting he was her latest conquest. Wallis denied the affair, asserting she did not steal her friends' boyfriends. Across the pond, Thelma, now 30, began an affair with the 27-year-old Ali Khan, the son of the head of the Nizari Ismailis Muslims. He was worshipped as a living deity. Ali was mobbed on his tours and irresistible to women. When Thelma was set to return to England, she found her cabin filled with red roses from Ali, who had booked himself on the ship to spend more time with her. Gossip soon spread about Thelma and Ali, claiming she had captured both the White Prince and the Black Prince. The Prince of Wales was not amused when he heard the news. Upon her return in 1934, Edward was polite but distant. He told her he had heard about Ali's attentions. Thelma asked if he was jealous, but he did not respond. As Edward remained cold, Thelma sought advice from Wallis, who reassured her that Edward still loved her and felt lost without her. The following weekend, Thelma joined Edward and Wallis at Fort Belvedere. She noticed the flirtation between Wallis and the prince, and when she confronted Wallis, she received a defiant look in return. Contemporaries often spoke of Wallis's psychological hold over the prince. Their letters were written in baby talk, where he pleaded for her love and affection. At dinners, if he spoke too much, she would kick him under the table, then kick him again to get him to speak. Again, we have 2 versions of events. At the party, Thelma asked Edward, "Darling, is it Wallis?" His features froze, and he told her not to be silly before walking out. Thelma left the next morning, never to return. Wallis claimed Thelma arrived at a dinner party, banging on the door as if trying to break in. She stormed into the party, then Edward took her into the library. People heard shouting before Thelma stormed out, and Edward returned without explaining. Wallis wrote to her aunt, "Thelma's rule is over." Thelma's sister Gloria was grappling with her own troubles. Her husband had died, and she was denied the trust fund he had set up for their child, receiving only a meager monthly allowance. Now, Gloria was fighting for custody of her daughter, and Thelma immediately rushed to America to support her. Thelma stood steadfastly by her sister throughout the trial. The ultimate betrayal came from their mother, who sided with the Vanderbilts, claiming older Gloria was an unfit mother. The two sisters believed their mother did this to become little Gloria's guardian and gain access to her trust fund. For more on this trial, please check out our video on Gloria Vanderbilt. When Thelma confronted her mother, saying this was not how mothers behaved, Mrs. Morgan warned her to watch out, or she would take her child away too. Thelma retorted, "Luckily, Mama, my child has a father alive, and if there is any complaint, it will come from him." After the trial, little Gloria was made a ward of the court, and Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney was put in charge of her, breaking the heart of her mother. After the case, Thelma moved to New York to be near her sister, and they opened a dress shop together. They promoted their clothes across the country and in England, even holding a fashion show in Harrods. From the start, they lost money, and soon Gloria declared bankruptcy. When they decided to return to England, a gossip columnist wrote, "Thelma Furness, the former girlfriend of royalty, has lost her glamour." Furious, she sued the newspaper and won $5,000. At the time, any slander to a woman's reputation was cause for libel. In the months before World War II, she reconciled with her first husband, Lord Furness. Duke asked to meet her for lunch, and she realized he was ill. They agreed to put the past behind them. She wanted to stay with Duke and help, but as the war broke out, she was advised to move to America with her son Tony to keep him safe from conscription. A few months later, her stepson Dick was reported missing in action. Witnesses said Dick ran straight at the enemy to protect his column and was last seen spread eagle on a tank with a gun pointed at him. He posthumously received the Victoria Cross. When Duke heard the news, he wept and his health deteriorated. He died in October 1940. She bought a house with her sister in California and attended the smartest Hollywood parties most evenings. She had a few affairs, but nothing serious. Tony befriended Shirley Temple, Roddy McDowell, and Elizabeth Taylor, but found it hard to make friends at school. He was often mocked, being called his lordship. He was still just 11. In the summer of 1941, little Gloria decided to move in with her mother and aunt in California. Still a teenager, they treated her as an adult, and she went on dates with much older actors like Errol Flynn, George Montgomery, and the mogul Howard Hughes. When she married Pat DiCicco, her mother and aunt were delighted, despite his background and rumors that he was perhaps involved in the death of his first wife. Gloria Sr. and Thelma hosted a cocktail reception at their home. At the end of the reception, a gunman tried to rob them, coming in through the back door, pretending he had a gun, and saying, "This is a stick-up." Thelma gave up her $1,000 V for Victory clips and said, "You are quite foolish to do this, as the house is full of cops." The robber then fled. The next day, while they were telling the press, the gunman arrived at the door with a parcel. Inside were the clips and a note, "God in my right," the British monarch's motto. After Gloria's marriage failed, and she wanted to remarry a man 42 years older, her mother and aunt disagreed. Angered, Gloria broke contact and did not see or speak with them for 15 years. In her 40s, Gloria's health began to fail as she developed glaucoma. When she became almost completely blind, Thelma guided her with such skill that few people noticed her ailment. In 1956, their mother, Mrs. Morgan, died. The sisters had forgiven her after the trial and were at her bedside when she passed. The twins set up various short-lived businesses. They made toys for a time, then ventured into the fragrance industry, traveling around the country setting up outlets, but soon that too failed. They then entered advertising. In 1957, they promoted the slimming product AIDS. In the ad, Thelma said, "AIDS really works. I can say that from my own experience." In 1958, they wrote a joint memoir called Double Exposure. At the book's end, they wrote if they had their lives to live over again, they would probably do it all and make the same mistakes. However, in a later edition, Thelma added, "I would do it all over again, except introduce Wallis to the prince." Over the years, Gloria Sr. and Jr. began to repair their relationship, and Gloria Sr. met her grandchildren. Little Gloria, now with Wyatt Cooper and deeply in love, hosted a grand 60th birthday party for her mother and aunt. When she discovered she was pregnant with Wyatt's child, she invited her mother and aunt to stay with her for the birth. However, Gloria was too ill and needed to be hospitalized. Thelma, as always, sat by her sister's side as little Gloria called to announce the birth of her son. A short time later, Gloria Morgan passed away from cancer. Little Gloria later wrote that she believed the only woman her mother truly loved was her twin. Thelma survived 5 more years, staying close to little Gloria, and was able to see her son Tony give his first speech in the House of Lords. In 1970, while visiting little Gloria, she fell ill and died of a heart attack on her way to the hospital. In her handbag was the now threadbare miniature teddy bear she had exchanged with the prince years before. She was buried with Gloria in the Holy Cross Cemetery, Culver City, Los Angeles. Thelma Furness's life was a tapestry woven with threads of glamour, scandal, and poignant love. Her affair with the Prince of Wales, symbolized by the cherished threadbare teddy bear she carried until her death, marked her as a woman who loved deeply and lost profoundly. The bond with her twin sister Gloria, unwavering and steadfast, was the constant in a life filled with fleeting passions and tumultuous affairs. Her story, like a beautifully tragic novel, lingers on, a testament to a life lived vividly, if not wisely. Thanks for watching this week's video on Thelma Furness. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps keep the channel going. I love to hear your thoughts on the people we cover and who you would like to see next. And as always, thanks for watching.